Hello YouTube, I'm Dom the musician. My name's Dom, I'm a musician, here's my degree. In this series of videos I'm looking at Murray Gold's music for Doctor Who Series 1 and exploring what makes it so fantastic. I'm going to be going through in roughly chronological order and talking about some of my favourite themes. I'll also be using some musical jargon, but I'll be providing a glossary of terms that you can find in the description, so even if you don't know anything about musical theory, you hopefully won't get lost. Let's go! I like the production on this one. Until the orchestra come in, there's hardly any reverb, so it sounds quite airless and artificial. This track might also sound familiar to anyone who's ever played the PS2 game Ratchet & Clank. The music in that game often uses a lot of orchestral samples mixed with electronic beats. And in this episode in particular, I often found myself thinking, did Murray Gold write the music for Ratchet & Clank? The main melody is played on either a theremin or a synth made to sound like a theremin. If you've never been to a Bill Bailey gig, a theremin is an electronic instrument that uses proximity sensors to generate sound waves and is closely associated with sci-fi and aliens. This makes perfect sense in this episode. Rose has just met an alien who's taken her to meet a whole other bunch of aliens.
They're just so alien. The aliens.
Murray also uses tonality to convey the sense of alienation. You get these chords which don't usually go together. Some are minor when they'd normally be major. You've got this A flat minor, which feels weird going into this C minor. Then there's this A flat major, like you'd expect, but then that sounds weird going into this C major. Sounds very strange because the third has gone up from the minor to the major third. Every time you think you've got a grasp on the tonality, it dances away from you, in sort of the same way that Rose is struggling to adjust to this new environment. Murray says about the track, Cassandra was a villain through and through, but the music that accompanied her reflected her playful theatricality and a mixture of space age and vaudeville. I think you get that playfulness in the waltz rhythm. That's kind of the only familiar thing about the music. The cool thing about the waltz is that, for me at least, it creates a feeling of weightlessness. I think that's why it worked so well in 2001: A Space Odyssey. That was such an influential film in so many ways that, whether Murray was directly influenced or not, we now have this subconscious association with waltzes and space. Maybe that's because, unlike a piece in 4/4, which has 2 downbeats per bar, down, up, a piece in 3/4 has 2 upbeats, like down, up, down, up, which makes it feel a bit more floaty. While we're on the subject of aliens, this scene is interesting.
How intimate.
There's more where that came from.
I bet there is.
I just love that sexy sitar. Firstly, because it coincides with Jabe checking the Doctor out, and secondly, because it's part of a trend you often get in Western film scores, where foreign equals alien. It's a cultural shorthand we have in the West, where a film will show you an alien, and you'll hear a sitar or a didgeridoo or an mbira, and for better or for worse you'll think, ooh, that sounds weird. What a weird alien. In a way that you wouldn't if you heard a saxophone or a piano or an acoustic guitar. It's not just with music though. I mean, why do you think all Chris Chibnall's aliens sound like yoga positions?
The Shakri.
Saranga.
We're in the Taraji system.
Simsha of the Stenza.
Tim Shaw.
Sometimes I feel like you could base an entire sci-fi franchise around the juxtaposition of space and retro pop songs.
Dance off, bro!
I think the reason those needle drops worked so well in Guardians of the Galaxy was because James Gunn knew how to pick songs where the lyrics commented on the situation in more than just the most obvious way. And I think either Murray or Russell T Davies or whoever was responsible for choosing these tracks knew that too. Sometimes I feel that I've got to run away. That's exactly how Rose feels, both in the sense that she runs out of the room because she's feeling overwhelmed, but also that she's run away with the Doctor from her life on Earth. Once I ran to you, now I run from you. They're really leaning into this can she trust the Doctor thing. And then it carries on with Toxic. You know, Britney sings a guy like you should wear a warning, which is actually coincides with things getting dangerous for Rose for the first time. I really like how it segues into Murray's score for the sun filter scene, but it stays in the same tempo and key, but now with a house beat. And though they're upbeat, neither of these are particularly happy songs. I mean, I'm not here to analyse Soft Cell and Britney Spears, but they're both certainly in minor keys. Anyway, on an unrelated note, there's not a lot to say about the Unquiet Dead, musically or otherwise. It's pretty run-of-the-mill, scary music, you know, lots of scary choirs, creepy chimes, things like that. The one interesting thing about it is that there is a 6.5-minute sequence with absolutely no music. And not a quiet dialogue scene either, an action scene with ghosts and a chase and Rose getting kidnapped. I think it's interesting when you consider that a common criticism of later series was that it was just wall-to-wall music. And though this is a very extreme example, I appreciate how, for this series at least, Murray was able to hold off and sometimes let the scene do its own thing. But like I say, that's all I had to say about the Unquiet Dead. So if it's alright with you, I'm going to go back to talking about the end of the world now. Murray says about Rose's theme, "Those last scenes juxtaposed the unimaginable with the ordinary and provided yet another of Russell Davis's startling and acute single-word characterizations. Chips. She just wanted chips. The piece sort of wrote itself. I watched the pictures, listened to the dialogue, and played along at the piano. We reused this many times, always to suggest Rose, or home, or the longing for home. For some reason, the prickly bit at the end is the emotional landing point. We usually try to make it coincide with the dramatic heart of a scene." So, have you heard of Sergei Prokofiev's 1936 composition Peter and the Wolf? If not, basically it's a short story where the different instruments of the orchestra are used to portray the different characters. The duck is an oboe, the cat is a clarinet, the grandad is a bassoon, obviously. It's an orchestral technique that a lot of composers, myself included, have picked up on. And Murray Gold isn't above it. When you see Daleks, you hear choirs. When you see Cybermen, you hear brass. When you see Clara, you hear a piano. And when you see Rose, you hear also a piano, but before. There are only so many instruments, you know. You get a nice little prelude to Rose's theme at the start of the episode, with this delicate little piano melody in parallel sixths.
You lot, you spend all your time thinking about dying.
In some ways, it feels like an inversion of the start of her theme, which goes like this. I think it's Murray's way of saying, remember the piano, because that's going to be Rose's instrument from now on. The scene Murray wrote this theme to was the final one, where the Doctor takes Rose back to Earth. There's not much dialogue, so the music really gets the chance to shine. Then it segues beautifully into the Doctor's theme when he tells her about the Time War.
My planet's gone. It's dead. It burned like the Earth.
The turning point comes when Rose says, "There's me," and the D drone changes to C major.
It's me.
The texture starts to fill out and it sounds warmer, kinder. When he says, "Do you want to go home?" you get this gorgeous B flat major 7.
I want...
It's a minor chord stacked on top of a major chord. So it perfectly illustrates Rose's indecision. And it's cool that it comes at a point where Rose is struggling to express herself. It's like the music is saying what she can't express. And then the Doctor smells the chips and we're back to that lovely warm C major.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want chips.
Me too.
Right then, before you get me back in that box, chips it is and you can pay.
No money.
Until it resolves to a D major at the end. Which, if you don't know, when a minor key resolves to the tonic major, it's called un tierce de Picardie. That about wraps everything up this time. Join me next time when I'll be talking about Aliens of London and World War III. I still haven't thought of a sign-off, and at this point, I'm starting to think I may never come up with one. So, just have a think about that, eh?